Welcome to the Scriptcase training video. Today we will be having a look at how we can create a property management system, such as the one we are looking at now. Within this you'll be able to manage locations, the properties, as well as view the property, view rental properties that are being rented, as well as bookings on those properties. You then also have a client view where you'll have a nice big image of the property, as well as all the information regarding the property itself and all the default security options built into the portal. Within the creation of this, I have used various resources such as Pixabay, Font Awesome, and Icon Finder. Icon Finder is used for the logo within the menu. Font Awesome is integrated within Scriptcase already and is then also used within the portal. I've also used Pixabay, and I've also integrated Bootstrap into the lists and the form applications, which can then be also used throughout the portal. So I will be building all of this within Scriptcase, and as you may already know, this professional PHP rapid application or RAD system is quite good for creating grids, forms, and so forth. And by adding libraries into Scriptcase, we can create a great deal with our project. So starting within Scriptcase, I have already created here 4 folders. I'm already also starting with some resources, so we will have a look at some of those and use them within the project. So I have here, first of all, 4 folders, as I had mentioned, properties, locations, reservations, and bookings. So I haven't yet created any applications, and that's what we're going to start doing. But before I do that, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call that Client View, and click Create. Now, because I've done that, Scriptcase has seen that there are no applications yet, and now it's giving me the option to create new applications. I'm going to cancel that for now, because otherwise those new applications will be created in that folder, in this folder here, because I've just created it. I want to start creating applications for the properties folder. But before we start creating the applications, let's first have a look at the database that we're using, as well as the resources that we will be using within Scriptcase and where they currently are. So, of course, I've already created the project and the folders and so forth, so I already also have a database. So if I come here to Database and then Database Builder, I can then check out the database as well as the included tables. So here you can see I have a database called Manage Properties, and it has some tables called Bookings, Locations, Properties, Property Images, and Rentals. Okay, so if I select each one of these, you'll then also see the fields relevant to each table. So for locations, it's just the ID and the name. For the bookings, we're collecting the booking date, email, name, telephone number, and so forth. For the properties, we're retaining then the property information, so the capacity, the location ID, which is then linked here to the locations table, the images, and then the property images, which is again then also retaining the property ID, as well as the image file linking to the properties table. And then we have a rentals table, where we have the week number, date from, to the amount, as well as then the status of the rental. Okay, so as well as the database, we also are using some libraries within the project. So here when I come to Tools, I can go to External Libraries. Now here within the External Libraries, there is a library that I've created. So if I scroll down, I'll find here the Property Manage. And it's added, so I'm currently using it. If I edit this, I can see the files that I am using for this library, for this project. So here I have, first of all, just a background image, some images, extra images that I can place within the project, my libs for my JavaScript files or any other libraries I want to use within the project, custom login page, as well as then the CSS and images separated for the login. Now if the login page uses any libs, then it will access them from this folder. Okay, so we're only using here the property manage. Okay, so here remove library, save as, so it is currently active and the files are also saved within the project already. So now if I wanted to update those, which I may do later, then you can just upload files within that location. Now before starting this project, I'm going to go ahead and run the data dictionary And what I'm going to do is create a dictionary for this project. For the properties, could give it a description, and I will define the connection and create the data dictionary. Now with the data dictionary, I have then all of the tables that I'm using within this database. I'm going to select them and then click next, so that they are now added as language keys within Scriptcase. So now the reason why I'm doing this is then that on each of the applications I create, I just need to name them once and it will be applied among all applications. So I don't have any applications created yet, so I don't have to synchronize them. So I'm doing this now. And now if I select them all, I could synchronize, and there's no applications found, so I can just go back and leave that as it is. Okay, so now if I save that, now I could come in here now and edit each individual field, but I'm not a fan of that, so I'm going to leave that, and I'm just going to close this now. So now when I create a new application, which you're going to see for the properties, if I create now a new application, and we're going to start with the form application, so that we can start by adding the properties into our platform. So here I will select the table properties, and notice here the blue icon, which is indicating that the data dictionary is already seeing this table and will provide the titles for this. So I call it form properties. I'll just leave the title and I'm going to go create. So if I now run the form, we can see that we have the standard typical form that we have within our project. So I'm going to run through now and make some changes to clean it up a little bit, and we're going to have a much better looking form afterwards. So let's first of all come back into Scriptcase. So returning back to Scriptcase, we have then our properties, and then in the settings we'll first specify a width here, so that the width of the form is a little nicer to contend with, and we have something to work with. So then I'm going to change the toolbar. I'm going to move the buttons over here to the right, and I'll leave the rest of them as they are for the time being. Again, if I run that, the buttons now will be adjusted. Now I don't think the quick search will be needed in here, but I'll leave it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change in the layout the header and footer, and I'm going to remove the date to start with. Okay, so now I have a little nicer form to play with. So let's now adjust fields so that all the fields are how we want them to be displayed. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to add some multiple tabs in here and display the information nice and tidy. So let's first of all adjust the title field. Now I like to have larger fields for some relevant fields, so I'm going to increase that. I will leave the rest of the details. I'll go to available, and here we want to change this to maybe a radio button and using a switch, and here I'm just going to create a manual selection, yes and Y, and then just a no and an N, and insert that. Now I'll add them in two columns so they're displayed next to each other. And then for the capacity, we want to have here a spinner object. For the details, I'm going to add some extra characters here, so it's at least the same width as the title box, so I'll say 60 again. I'll increase to 4 lines so that it actually looks more like a multi-line text box. And for the amount field, let's there add a calculator, as well as the currency symbol usage. Now for the location ID, I don't think we'll leave that for the time being. So let's come back to that one. For images, here we have an image file to apply. Okay, so here we want file, image file name. I want to create a folder here. So when we upload the image, there are within their own folders for each property. So now if we add the property underscore and then the ID being used within this form, So if we come here to SQL, we can confirm that. Here the ID is ID. So I can then use the form variable here and it will generate the folder. So we need to make sure we click the create subfolder also, so that the new images are uploaded to the relevant folder. Okay, so I'm going to save my form and then I'm going to come back here to edit fields. Now the location ID and the ID, I don't want the ID displayed in here. The location ID, I want this at the top, and I'm going to go ahead and change that to a select. And then within the location ID, I'm going to change that to automatic lookup, locations, pick the name, and then provide the connection. And then I can run that again. And now our form looks like this. Okay, so we want to make some changes here. We want to adjust maybe the size of the image, depending now, because we could add multiple tabs, where we add everything into one and separate everything, or we can have everything. So let's maybe have a slightly different view. So I'm going to, we have the location. Let's move the location down actually. So I'm going to move the location below the title. Availability, I'll leave it where it is, the capacity. And let's move the capacity below the details. And the amount I will leave where it is. Okay, so let's save that. And then I'm going to come here to blocks, create a new block. And I will create another one. Well, no, let's not. I will leave that for now. So come back here to blocks. I have the option here for the next. I'm going to select tabs. I'm going to display the title. Now here I'm going to say property details. And here I'm going to call this one images. And I'm going to change the label for the images to above. For the properties, I'll leave them beside. And then I'm going to come back here to edit fields. And I'm going to move the images into the image block. Okay, so now when I run this now, our form is now slightly different again. We have now our images within a separate block as well as in a tab. So we can manage the image separately. We have the property details. And we have a spinner, we have a calculator for the amount. We have, now one thing we haven't done yet is dealt with these titles. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll start here, coming to locate locals, application language. And because we used a data dictionary, now we've added all of the table fields here into the dictionary. So here now I can make adjustments to all of these. So I change bookings, I change ID, and then once we've filled in all of the names and updated them, we click update messages. Now every time I create something for this specific table bookings, they will be named accordingly. So I apply that then to the other field options that we have here. Okay, so now I've updated all of the project messages, and now every time I create an application, so now if I run form properties, you see previously they were like so, and now when I run this now, they're all updated. So now for every application I create for this, as well as all other tables added here, bookings, locations, properties, property images, and rentals, the titles will be automatically applied. Now I want to also use this. Now I also want to use this within the blocks here. So here I have property details and images. So here I can apply a lang, and for instance I can say images. And here I can just say title, for instance, to differentiate a little bit. So now if I do that, I'm going to copy this, come back here to application languages, and I have here a general folder. Now I could use that, or I can create a new one. So I'll go ahead and create a new folder, and I'm going to call this block titles. Now I'm going to add the folder, and here I'm going to add my new language key. So it was lang underscore title and then images. And here then I can just type in images. Now if I update that, that will now be used here. So let's create a new one for property details. So I'm going to copy now the label, come back here, paste my label in here. Paste my label in here. And okay, so now I can update that, and I can run my form. And now here I can change this to a variable. And then run my application again. And now the titles will be displayed how they should always then be displayed throughout the entire portal. Okay, so now I can close that. Within my form properties now I have everything divided here nicely. I could place in a HTML editor if I wanted to here. So let's go ahead and do that actually. So for the details, let's change that from a multi-lines to a HTML editor. We have that here, HTML editor. Here I specify the height, and I'll say 420 pixels. And then I can change here the editor that I want to apply. So let's have a nice basic one, very basic. And then I can run that. And now my details field here will have a HTML editor in there. Okay, so now within this form I still want to add a multi-upload so that I can add further images from the properties here. So now let's come here, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a new field. I'm going to call it extra images or extra image, and click create. And then I'm going to change that from a standard text field to an image file name, and scroll down, and here we have then the option for multi-upload. So here I can select how many columns and so forth. So here I'm going to select the table, property images, and then select the IDs that I need to apply here. So we'll start with the option auto increment. So that it automatically increases the ID. For the property ID, we'll add the foreign key, and then we can select a field within this form, which is then the ID. And then for file, we want to upload. Now we can leave the options here as they are, we can adjust them. But I'll first scroll up, and we need to create here the subfolder and add the property details within this field also. So let's add that. We can then also give the option to delete the files, that they are deleted from the folder, so we don't end up with all the files on our server. And then we can go ahead and, well, first let's change the position of this field. So we've just created it. We see here it's actually created a new block. We didn't deselect that option during the creation of this field. And now if I run this, for instance, you'll see that we now have one tab, and then the fields are displayed below. So we need to change this so that it is either displayed in a new tab or below only the images. So let's come back here to our form, and we can actually come here to blocks and add tabs, then to the next one also. So if I run that again now, we now have the extra images in an extra tab and can manage them separately. Okay, so now we still need to add a title here. So let's add a new language variable. And I'll call that lang extra image. I doubt very much we'll need that again during this project, but then at least and now when we run the form again, the title is now also corrected. Okay, so we gave it the incorrect language key, so let's change that. Let's go back. Let's add our brackets. And then we can have the title displayed correctly. And here we don't want the title displayed within this, so let's go ahead and adjust that block here also. Hide the labels for both the images, so that here within the images this is not needed, and in the extra images that is not needed. So we can hide those and run that again, and now our images are much cleaner. Okay, so now let's adjust the title here and maybe change this so we're displaying the property name of what we're actually viewing here in the title as well. So let's come here back into Scriptcase, and we're going to access here now the header and footer within the layout. And if I remove the update title, and here I will place in a variable, and I'll just call it var head. I'll just add in a basic title, like so, for instance. And now if I run that, it will ask me now for a variable, which it doesn't have assigned yet, so we're going to do that now. Now if I run that, for instance, I can test it. I can run the form, and I can see that the title will be here applied. So come back to Scriptcase in the events, and then on load event, I will now then define the variable again. And I'm going to say equals, and it's going to be a field variable, which is then the title, which we have here. So now if I run that, we now have the property name there displayed. Okay, but we still are being asked there for the variable, and we don't want it displayed really at that point. So let's come back here to the application, and here the global variable. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that here, the var head, to out only. So now when I run this, it won't actually now ask me for the variable. Previously it doesn't need to, it's part of this form. Okay, so let's continue on then. We could actually change this form to one of the other standards if we wanted to, but this is actually looking really nice now to manage the property. So let's continue creating then our next application, which will now then be the properties grid. So we want now to view the list of properties. So here I'm creating a new application. I'm going to select the properties table, and I'm going to leave the default MySQL statement here, and I'm just going to click create. Okay, so now within the grid application, if I run this, we have a basic list of all of our properties. So now we want to make quite a few changes in here. So let's go ahead first of all and adjust our fields. And here I'm going to remove the ID. I'm going to display the location ID. I also want to display an image of the location. I'm going to hide the details. And then I'm going to run the grid again. Okay, so I now have some new fields here. Looks slightly different. And we want to make some further adjustments here. So I'm going to first of all go ahead and access fields and create a new field. And I'm going to call this one view. And I'm going to deal with that shortly. So then here we then have a new field called view. And I'm going to leave that as text. And let's first of all change some of these fields that we have here. So we have here our images. So we need to change that to an image type. So image file name. Here I'm going to select the subfolder again. I'm going to specify here an image height. And also a width. So when I run that, I now have my images displayed. So these don't have images yet, so we can add some to those shortly. Okay, so we have the images slightly obscure here, so let's go ahead and come here. Within the images here, we have here the option to maintain aspect ratio. So if I uncheck that, I can run that again, and they will all be displayed at my defined size. Okay, so we need to change here now the location, so we see which location this is. We can spruce up the availability as well as then add the view and change the toolbar. Okay, so I'm going to run through and go through the layout first of all. Let's change the header and footer, remove the date, and here I'm just going to give it a basic title. And we now have new title, remove the date. So let's deal with the toolbar. So we don't need all of these options. Over there, let's move these over there. And then if I run that again, my toolbar is nice and tidy now. Okay, and then of course I could remove any of these that I don't want displayed here. So now if I don't want the columns or the sorting options, and I don't want to provide group by either. Group by is actually a good thing to have because of course we have the locations. So I'm going to leave that in there and then save that. And then I can run that again. Okay, so now I have a much cleaner toolbar. Okay, so I'm going to access then the grid modules, and what I'm going to do is now here on the left hand side we have here the details still. I don't really need this because we're going to create a separate view for this. So what I'm going to do is deselect that. I'll leave the chart and summary because, well, it's optional. Then of course this can still be added, and the search is always handy. So let's leave those there. And then if I run that now, okay, so that's now removed, and I no longer have details here, but now we want to add this here over to the right. So then what I'm going to do is here, come back here to events, and then on record. And now within the grid application on record, if I come here to my code snippets, I have already pre-created for the project various snippets that I can then use for this project. So here I have for the grid properties on record. If I click that, I now have an if statement here. So if I'm saying if the capacity is more or less than 5, then update the capacity field, which we have here. For the view field, here I'm adding an icon into this field. And then if available, if this field equals yes, then we're going to, instead of just displaying that with a Y, we're going to display that with some bootstrap. So if I now go ahead and run that, we're going to have our grid application. We have our view icon here. Bootstrap is not yet applied yet, so this is why this availability here is not fully displayed. So let's go ahead and do that next. So now here on the onHeader event, I can place other content here again. So here on the snippet, I have here grid and then onHeader. So if I click that, I have here then first of all variable defined, which I will cover shortly. And then here you'll see I have here the bootstrap, the CSS, as well as then the bootstrap JavaScript file. If I add JavaScript extra, it will cause issues within the application. So we only need the CSS file and then the JavaScript file. Now here below that, you'll notice I have here style. Here I'm targeting the buttons, the SC button default, SC button OK, danger, and so forth. So now if I remove this and run my grid application, you now see that I have bootstrap applied. There are some issues here. If for instance now I go to view, or if I actually do anything in this, which for instance loading a modal window, it will push it down the bottom here. The buttons are all grayed out. So there are some bugs that you can have. For instance, if you add here the JavaScript or the popper JavaScript that comes with Bootstrap by default. So if I would come here and copy all of this, so these two lines, these cause issues within Scriptcase. You don't need those. So just remove those. And now what I'm going to do then is I'm going to reapply here the CSS styling. So here I'm changing the color of the buttons to white, so you see gray, and now they will be applied in white. And now we could apply further styling in here and apply our own style sheets, which are then located within the libraries that we have stored if we wanted to. Okay, so I'm going to save that now and see where we are. So let's make some slight adjustments here to the location. We need to change this still. So come here to location ID, and here I'm going to apply a lookup method, select automatic, and I'm going to select the locations table, the connection, select the connection, and run. Okay, so now I have the location displayed. And now we can customize the firm for the grid further. Okay, so now previously within the onHeader, I have here a variable. So if I copy this, that's what I placed here, and this is now going to use a font awesome icon with the color tomato. Just FA home, FALG, so I'm making it a little larger. And if I come here to the header and footer, I can now apply that here for my properties. Click run. And now I have also a logo displayed up here in the top, making the grid look a little nicer. Okay, so we now want to go ahead and create the view option here. So let's come back into Scriptcase, and I'm going to create a new application. And select the grid. And again, I will go ahead and select the properties table. So now here I have the default fields. I'm going to leave these. I'm going to change the name from just properties to properties view and click create. Okay, so here first of all I'm going to remove the details, the summary, the chart, and the search. They will not be needed here. And for the grid, this is going to be a slide grid, so I'm going to change this here from for the grid, for the orientation. I'm going to change that here to slide. And I'll set the width to 0 and automatic. Okay, so if I run that now, I don't just have a standard grid, I have this displayed like so. Okay, so There's quite a few changes here we want to make in this view. We see we have the images here. We need to add these here, so let's come here to edit fields, and we want this image displayed here. We also want the location displayed. We don't need the ID, and we actually want all of the other information here, so let's go ahead and run that. And now, okay, so now we have our images here and so forth. So let's come now to adjust our fields. So here I will change the image to an image field. I'll add my subfolder and specify an image and height again. And if I run that, I now have the image displayed. Now I do want to attach also the other images from the remaining images which we upload. So I'm going to straight ahead create a new application, select another grid, and this time I'm going to select the property images. I'm going to leave the default fields and click create. Now here I'm going to change the SQL, and here I'm going to apply a where statement, where ID equals, and I'm going to make a variable up of our property. Of our property ID. And now if I run this, in fact I need a full variable, not a field variable. So here, my bad, and I should add also. Okay, so now I have adjusted here my SQL statement so that I'm targeting or requesting specifically an ID. So now when I open now my grid, I now have to specify a location, which images I want to view for which property. Okay, so now that this should be for the property ID. Property ID equals var property ID. So now if I run this again, now if I select property, and now receive those images. Okay, so here we want to apply the same thing again. We want to come here to settings, the grid modules, and we don't need to search the detail, the summary, or the chart. And within the grid, we again want to change this to a slide. And I'm going to leave the 100% so that when it's pulled into the other applications, it can just be full size. So I'll leave that. If I run, specify the property ID. Okay, so now I have the property details. So now let's display, first of all, only the image field. So hide the property ID and the ID. Only display the image. And then for the block on this one, we want to here hide the label. Okay, and now if we run that again, we now have, okay, so just the images. Now within the field, we can change the field to an image field, image by file name. Again, I will specify a height and a width, or larger. Let's have them larger here. And we specify the subfolder also. Now if I run, I guess the images are actually located in another folder for the time being. Okay, so yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we want to change this also so we can display these images next to each other. Let's leave that as it is for the time being, and we can come back to that in part 2, where we will continue from where we have left off during this part of the Scriptcase property management portal creation. My name is Jamie Oates, and again, thank you very much for watching.